Okay, Catherine, why don't we just jump right in? One of the distinctions that I think might need some clarification as I'm hearing speakers and consultants talk in the industry is the difference between speaking and training. I mean, there's so many different words we can use: consulting, workshops, seminars, but speaking and training, like where do we draw a line?
Well,
Is
I
there?
think, yeah, there is a line, I think, but this is a self-made definition. So I want to preface it by saying, I don't think this is the definition. It's just a definition and a distinction that has really worked for me. So in the beginning of my career, I didn't have it. And, meeting planners would say, gosh, we're interested in hiring you to do a presentation. And I would think speech. Instantly, if it was a meeting planner of an association, or it was going to be at a meeting, I would think speech. And then when I went to create something, I would think training. And but I found that it tripped me up, because the truth is, other people who are hiring you, whether people are coming to attend one of your programs and paying for that, or whether a meeting planner or a client is bringing you in, or maybe you're going to do a webinar for a client, whatever, whoever is the buyer is has something they want, but they often don't have the same vocabulary about asking you for it. And
Mhm.
so once I began to say, what I need to know is not what they call it, and they don't have to call it what I call it. What I need to know is what is the outcome they want from this thing, this time. And so I've taken two different distinct outcomes and given them the name speaking or speeches trainings. And so just know that other people may call it a keynote or a seminar or a workshop, or a breakout. Or if someone says, I want you to do a breakout, it could mean either one of these things. And so I think for me, I just nod my head and say, great, I'd love to do a breakout for you. I want to make sure I craft the right kind of breakout. So would you mind if I ask you a few questions? And then my questions are around this distinction. So the distinction for me, maybe that's where we should
That'd
start.
be great.
Yeah, is that when I'm thinking of writing a speech and delivering a speech, and for me, just forget what they do, but for me, I think it's because they said the outcome was to motivate them, inspire them, maybe shift their mind around a topic, maybe to give them a different way of viewing a topic, a fresh perspective, to inspire them to take some action, give them a few pearls that they could take away and experiment with. If it's anything like that, if that's the answer to the outcome question, then I know I'm putting together what I would call a speech. And in a minute, I'll talk about what different choices I make if I decide that's what I'm creating.
Mm.
Versus if the outcome question is answered with any level of they desire mastery at any level, even at a low level. If they say something like, well, we'd really like for them to gain some skills that they could use on Monday morning. That's often what people say at like an association, when you're being hired for a presentation association, they'll say, well, we really want to give them some skills that on Monday morning they can apply them. And so then I go deeper. I say, so, let's say they're hiring me for courageous conversations. I say, so you want them to be able to feel confident having a courageous conversation on Monday morning. And they say, yes. So let's say they offered me 60 minutes, and they want this to be for office managers, owners, anybody who works in the dental field. And they're going to give me the traditional classroom setup, or maybe even not classroom, maybe theater, no tables. And I'm going to have an hour. So I know I can still do mastery in an hour, absolutely. But I can't do it on a enormous topic with every different position there. I need to narrow it down. So we could narrow the audience just to office managers. We could narrow the topic just to a conflict, maybe like light level, gossip or something that's not traumatic, not really, really serious. Maybe just a light. So picking a smaller focus of content, I could deliver mastery, but they've often picked it off my website. They've gotten my course description that you helped me write and from my speakers packet. That's the big view. It's the comprehensive look at this subject. And if they're telling me I want mastery on that big subject and I can give you 45 minutes, and you'll have 1,000 people, I'm not going to be able to create mastery in the way they want, and they will be disappointed. So that's the distinction for me. It's not the names. And I often say, you could give a speech to one person and you could give a really incredible, true training that delivers mastery to 2,000 people. If you had the right amount of time and the narrow subject, or the right amount of time and a broad subject, just the intention of the outcomes is different. So is that helpful in terms of distinguishing between not only what it is, but why it's important?
Yes, and there was something you said in there that I'd love for you to take a little deeper. You mentioned that if they thought they were going to get all of that, which could be a 3-day experience, right? The way it's written. And you said they would be disappointed. So how do you handle that so that they're not disappointed? How do you explain, well, here's what I can do?
Yeah. Well, I always say to them, my goal, and I know it's your goal, is to deliver a program that people walk out raving. And my experience, after all of these years of doing this, my experience is that if we can take this general umbrella topic of courageous conversations or dealing, diffusing and managing conflict better, and we can narrow it to their biggest pain point of all, if we can narrow it to that and just pick one and go deep and give them that mastery that you want, that's one option that I think will send them out of the back of the room raving.
We could do it in 45 minutes.
And we could do it in 45 minutes. Or if you have the flexibility and ability to give me more time, or to look at maybe a different outcome, then we could talk about that broad speech that you saw in my speakers package. We could look at delivering that, but let's be realistic about the outcome. Let's be realistic about the outcome, and let's talk about length of time. And so I'm just their partner in how do we craft something around this topic that sends them out raving, because that's what meeting planners want. And what clients want is for their teams to be raving, saying, I can't wait till we have more of this. Right. This was exactly what we needed. So, or someone comes to your course and leaves and says, I would do this again 100 times. This was so worth my time and money. So that's what we're looking for. And I think those are the verbal skills that I use to just get in partnership with the meeting planner and say, am I right in assuming that you want people to leave these courses just saying that this was just phenomenal? Yeah. And it really hit the target, hit the bullseye. And if they say yes, which of course they will, then you say, great, then I'd love to discuss how we could up our chances of that happening. Yeah. And so I have had meeting planners say, well, maybe they don't have to be able to completely do it on Monday morning. I mean, I just want them to have a good sense of it. And I'm like, oh, okay. Or sometimes I'll say, well, to do what you want, I'm going to need a different room setup. To get, if they're really saying, no, I want this to be high quality training, then I say, then I need round tables. I need, or at least need classroom set up in a certain way, because I'm going to need them to work with partners. I'm going to need them to roll up their sleeves and get their hands on their work to deliver that for you. Right. And sometimes they'll say, great. And sometimes they'll say, oh, well, we wouldn't be able to afford that. We've got too many people in the room. We can't afford that setup. Then I'll say, okay, well, then let's talk about the other the other pieces then. It's just about, can we negotiate on, outcome, length of time, those kinds of things. Just get in the conversation with them so
Yeah.
that you always deliver.
What I'm hearing too is it's just so important to talk to them, right? I
Yes,
think so
yes.
often we don't, or to make a point to be sure and be clear that you understand what they want. I mean, it just makes you more um, valuable as a speaker to them, and it just is really going to, I would think, hold up the speaker who this is part of the way they do business, is going to be seen as more of a professional. It's going to be seen as someone who is very experienced and who you bring that experience to really help them have a great meeting. I have one more question for you, but before I say that, I was going to say, I think a lot of times meeting planners are not really 100% sure what they need. I know that
Right.
myself, I feel that way in my meetings. I'm like, I know I want a certain topic, but the meeting we held recently with most of the speakers, I was like, well, just kind of something from around this. And I trusted because I knew who they were and that they were a great speaker. And I think sometimes we're just kind of, the meeting planners are rolling the dice, like hoping it works out.
Yes.
So how valuable for them, and you really make a friend in the planner when you make the planner's life easy like this, and then they can feel confident.
Yeah.
Here's my last question before I'll ask you if there's anything more. So one more question would be, is there anything that I think you started alluding to this, is what would you do differently when you're preparing for a speech versus a training? Like, what would we need to know as we're preparing?
Well, I think it begs a little bit deeper question of what is mastery? Like, what is that really? And it seems like it's a no duh question, but I think it's worth um, identifying that mastery means they have some level of confidence in doing the thing or saying the thing um, well, after you are gone, after they have left the room, after they have gone back to their life, back to their work. That's some mastery. And to the degree they feel more confident and more practiced and more certain, they have a higher degree of mastery, right? And so, whereas in a speech, by my definition internally, I think I just want to get them to go. I want them to walk out and say, that was really good. I've actually never thought about it in this way. I can see where it would take more practice, but I'm really interested in pursuing that, or I'm interested in learning more. Or maybe they walk out and say, that answered a couple questions for me that have kind of kept me from doing this. And it cleared that up. It made it seem easier. And I think I do want to take a little deeper dive, right? So if I do that in a speech where I inspire them or I get them to think a little bit differently about something and I make something seem easier and more accessible, then I've done my job in the speech, which is just to illuminate and deepen the idea.
Right.
Mastery is just competency. It's competencies at some level, and those are just different. So how I do it, I want to say that I always am looking for engagement, right? Like in a speech, it wouldn't matter if I was doing 10 minutes. If I was doing it in front of any type of an audience, I would want to use some techniques and tools that engage the listener, engage their interest, kept their interest, recaptured their interest. So whether I'm doing a speech or a training or anything, I'm always thinking, what would be the best tools for this presentation to capture and recapture interest? So that's a given across the board. Where they diverge, is if I'm trying to create a training and some level of mastery out of the back end, some of that engagement has to include practice, right? It has to include practice. Whereas engagement in a speech where my goal is just to illuminate and deepen an idea, I just need to keep their attention. So sometimes, like a good example would be many of the people in this conference have heard the exercise whistle stop, or maybe they've experienced it, some version of it, where you stand up, get a partner, answer a question from the instructor. And then when the whistle blows, you get another partner, you answer another question. That exercise, I often use it in speeches to get them connected to the topic and get them connected to some new ideas. In a training, I sometimes will do it where they will, on the first go round, they will practice step one of the framework I'm teaching. And then they will get a new partner and practice step two. So I'm still using the same tool, but for a different outcome.
Right. That's a
See?
great idea.
Yeah. So that helps me when I look at my whole toolbox of choices of training exercises and little things that I can do and tools that I can use. When I look at it, I'm very clear what my outcome is. So it makes choosing them so much easier. If these are practice tools, they take time. And in a 1 hour speech,
Yes.
you may not have 15 minutes or 20 or 30 minutes to do a triad learning. Sometimes that can take 45 minutes and it doesn't line up. So it wouldn't be a choice, you see, and you don't need mastery anyway in this. So it's not your best choice. Over here could be an incredibly good choice. Is that answer
That's
that?
great. Yeah, that's great. I mean, there's so much good content here. I wish we could talk for the rest of the day, but
I
we're
know.
back in just a minute, back to our summit. So before we go, is there anything remaining that you'd like to tie a bow on this before we go back?
Yeah, I would just say, relax into it, experiment with it. My definition may not be exactly yours, but it's been really helpful for me to come back to my desk and say, what am I building? And how do I build something that will just hit the mark and blow the thing out of the water, that they just feel like they got everything they came for, everything they were promised, and that they feel like they want to hear more. And so I think just relax into it, experiment with it, find your own definition. And then my second thing would be, if you haven't already, whether it's with Lion Speak or someone else, and there are other places, but go on a quest for building your toolbox so that when you sit down to do this, you have a plethora of tools that you've used and experimented with and that it just makes developing a program and putting your program together easier,
Yes.
way more fun. And I think over time, um, fresh, it keeps it fresh. Like I'll say, I think a lot of people at ADOM have heard me before. And now, like this year, I'm going back again. This is like my 4th or 5th time to speak at ADOM. And so I can't keep taking whistle stop only, right? I've got to. And so having that toolbox that I keep developing and experimenting with allows me to say, well, what would serve the same purpose but be different? And so it keeps it fresh. It keeps you fresh and relevant.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we might have some questions from the
Yeah.
group, certainly some comments after that. So let's go ahead and head back. Thank you, Catherine.
Okay, you're welcome.